Your body is like this incredible, complex city that is always buzzing with activity. But just like any busy city, it creates a ton of waste. So, how in the world does it handle all that garbage? Well, it turns out it has one of the most sophisticated waste management systems you could ever imagine, working 24/7 to keep everything clean and running perfectly.
It's something we totally take for granted every single day, right? But it's a process that is absolutely critical for our survival. So today, we're going to pull back the curtain and get to know this amazing internal cleanup crew, the human excretory system.
So, here's our game plan. We'll kick things off by figuring out what this cleanup crew is and why we need it. Then, we'll meet the main organs on the team, take a really close look inside the kidney, and see exactly how urine gets made. After that, we'll trace its path out of the body, and we'll wrap it all up by talking about why this whole process is just so incredibly important. All right, first things first, what are we even talking about when we say the excretory system? Let's break it down. Okay, so at its very core, it's a team of organs all working together with one major goal: to filter your blood. They're pulling out harmful stuff and any extra water you don't need. You can almost think of it like a super advanced water purification plant, but for your body. The whole point is to maintain a healthy internal environment. It's all about keeping things in perfect balance, a state that scientists call homeostasis. And this system is an absolute master of multitasking. I mean, yeah, its main job is to get rid of metabolic waste like urea. That's the stuff left over from breaking down proteins. But it's also a master regulator. It fine-tunes your body's water levels, your salt balance, your pH levels. It even helps control your blood pressure. It's truly doing it all behind the scenes. So who are the key players on this all-star team? Let's meet the cast of characters. Really, it all boils down to four main parts. First, you've got a pair of kidneys. These are the powerhouses that do all the hard filtering work. Then, connected to them, you have a pair of ureters, which are basically transport tubes. They lead down to the urinary bladder, which is a stretchy, muscular storage tank. And finally, you've got the urethra, which is the exit ramp. It's a really simple but incredibly effective plumbing system. Now let's zoom in on the undisputed star of the show, the organ that does all the heavy lifting. We are heading inside the kidney factory. So these two little bean-shaped organs tucked away on either side of your spine are your body's master filters. And get this, every single day they process about 200 liters of blood. Can you believe that? They're just tirelessly sifting out all the junk while making sure all the good stuff gets returned to your body. Now, if you were to slice a kidney right down the middle, you'd see three main zones. The outer layer is called the renal cortex. The inner part is the renal medulla, and then there's this kind of funnel-shaped area called the renal pelvis, which acts as the main collection bin for the final product, urine. But where does the real magic happen? Well, for that, we have to go microscopic, deep inside these tiny little structures called nephrons. You can think of these as the individual workers on the factory floor. They are the tiny, fundamental filtering units of the kidney. So how many of these little workers do you think are in there? Brace yourself. Each kidney contains about 1 million nephrons. 1 million. That is just a staggering number of these tiny factories, all packed into an organ that's only about the size of your fist. And each one of those million nephrons has its own little assembly line. It all starts at the glomerulus, which is this tangled up ball of tiny blood vessels where the first big filter happens. That's tucked inside a little cup called the Bowman's capsule. From there, the fluid goes on a long, winding journey through a series of tubes where it gets fine-tuned, before finally ending up in what's called a collecting duct. So how do all those little parts of the nephron actually work together? Well, they follow this beautifully coordinated three-step process to make urine. So, step one is glomerular filtration. This is where blood gets pushed through the filter, and basically all the small stuff, water, salts, glucose, waste products, get squeezed out. Then comes step two, tubular reabsorption. And this part is so important. The body basically realizes, whoa, we just threw out some good stuff. So it reclaims all the useful things like glucose and most of the water and sends them back to the blood. And finally, step three is tubular secretion. This is like the final quality check, where the body actively pumps any leftover waste out of the blood and into the tubule. So at the end of this whole production line, what's left over? Urine. And it's basically a cocktail of those metabolic wastes, like urea, uric acid, and creatinine, all dissolved in the extra water and salts that your body decided it didn't need. Okay, so the urine has been made, now what?
Let's follow it on its final journey out of the body.
From that collecting area inside the kidneys, the urine flows down into the ureters. These are just thin, muscular tubes that gently squeeze the urine downwards, drop by drop, towards the urinary bladder. The bladder is like a super stretchy holding tank. And then, when the time is right, the urine finally leaves the body through one last tube, the urethra.
Now, the fancy scientific name for this final act is micturition, though, we all just call it urination. And while there are some reflexes that drive the process, thankfully, in adults, it's something our nervous system gives us voluntary control over.
So after tracing that whole incredible journey from a microscopic filter all the way to the final exit, let's just zoom back out for a second. Why is this amazingly complex process so absolutely fundamental to our health?
It really all comes down to that one word we mentioned earlier, homeostasis, that perfect, stable, internal balance. Without our cleanup crew working around the clock, toxic waste would build up, our body's fluid and salt levels would go completely haywire, and we just couldn't survive. This system isn't just important, it's absolutely non-negotiable for life.
And that kind of leaves us with one last thing to think about. This incredible system does so much for us without us ever having to lift a finger. So what's one simple thing you can do today to help it do its job just a little bit better? It's definitely a question worth pondering.